Hello, and welcome to the Inclusive Insights, the show for leaders by leaders with valuable insights and tips to supercharge your leadership. I'm your host, Neetu Razdan, and today we have an intriguing topic that's at the forefront of modern human resource management. We'll be delving into the fascinating world of artificial intelligence and how it's reshaping the roles and responsibilities of HR professionals. Before we jump in, let's take a moment to consider the evolving landscape of human resource. Human resource has always been about people, nurturing talent, fostering growth, and ensuring a thriving workplace culture. But in today's fast-paced world, the expectation and demands in HR teams have expanded exponentially. Joining us today is Brandon Yoon. Brandon is a dear friend, a fellow entrepreneur, and an innovator. He's a tech executive with 25 years of experience in Fortune 100 companies like Microsoft, Samsung, Apple, and many more. He is currently a vice president of digital and e-commerce at Autodesk. He also holds a PhD in management with focus on human resource management and organizational behavior. Welcome, Brandon.
Hi, Neetu. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Well, first, let's talk about rise of AI in HR. As you know, AI is everywhere. And I want to understand, how do we bridge this gap between AI and HI, HI being human intelligence? And I think the war is on between what is superior. In my mind, it's very HI is superior, but let's talk about how AI is actually helping, HI solve problems or actually augment, spaces that could be handled much more easily. So to kick off things, let's talk about the rising influence of AI in the HR realm. Artificial intelligence has paved the way for a new era of HR, as we all know, one where mundane and time-consuming tasks can be delegated to machines, freeing up human professionals to focus on what truly matters. So what is your thought? I think it's a great thing, Brandon. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think AI is one of these really, truly transformative technologies that's going to disrupt and change everything. You heard Bill Gates kind of compare it to the invention and birth of the internet in terms of the impact it will have on our industry. And not only technology, but pretty much every industry that I can think of, right? And every work, industry, geography, so on and so forth. And I think a big part of that, because AI will evolve. The one thing we know is that we're barely getting started. And the concept of artificial intelligence, as you know, is a field that is multi-decades old, right? The concept of things like natural language processing, large language models, and automation has existed for decades. But now I think we're at the cusp of, okay, really greatly expanding the capacity and the capability of that core. And we're able to apply it in a way that I don't think was really possible before. And I think one big area of that is generative AI, which I think is what a lot of people are super excited about.
Yes.
So thinking about the bridge of AI and HI, a lot of people ask like, oh my God, are AI and algorithms and machines going to replace a lot of humans? I would say that's a long way down the road if it ever happens, because you and I both know we're not logical beings at the end of the day, right? We're a very complex mix of left brain, right brain, rational thought, emotional thought, and we're very, very complex. So unlike solving a math equation, to get to the level of understanding and having empathy, intuition, knowing how humans would react to certain stimuli, and having that informed by context, expecting an algorithm to be really good at that and to actually apply it in all the multitude of scenarios, I just don't see that happening. I mean, call me wrong. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. But what I do see happening is, and a very important point you made, which is I see AI as a tool. Okay, so it will change the way we work. It will not replace us of who's doing the work. I'm sure there will be edge cases where, again, automation of mundane, repetitive tasks will be taken over. But for the majority of complex things, particularly in the field of HR, where we're dealing, again, with people who are very complex entities, I believe that HR professionals will really stand out if they know how to leverage the power of AI but not really be worried so much and obsessed with, oh my God, is it coming to take over my job? So, how do we actually, to your point, use these tools to push a lot of the heavy lifting that required a lot of bandwidth, time, and effort, not really fun to do, of
Yeah.
for example, generating intelligence data from a lot of different HR data repositories and creating pivot tables and visualizations of where we are. I don't think people necessarily enjoyed doing the data dumping, cleansing, analyzing, creating charts, and so on and so forth. They wanted to get to the insights as fast as possible, and then they wanted to act on those insights, right? So now, hopefully with generative AI and a lot of the core AI engines, we can get abstraction from a lot of that work and then just say, show me, right? And then boom, it's right there.
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, now I know what I need to focus on and I know how to approach this. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I love a couple of points that you made. One, how do you make AI conscious? Like, how do you build that emotion within AI? I think that's going to be a real challenge. And it'll take a long time until we figure out how AI can be conscious and be human-like. So that is one thing, because more and more we are realizing as leaders, having that empathy, having those emotions as part of you running an organization is extremely important, right? You make it human more than anything. We are no machines at the end of. So that's one thing. And second thing I love, and I want to kind of go deeper into that maybe in another episode, is I think AI is really going to help HI or humans to actually free up space and free up the bandwidth in terms of intellect to solve bigger, better problems, right? So if you're not worried about rudimentary stuff, and if rudimentary stuff is taken over by AI, that frees up our bandwidth to think about, higher complex problems and how to probably make AI conscious, right? So I think it's a great thing to have, at your hands, and it has become mainstream, and it feels like the floodgates have opened, and it's just the beginning. So I love it. And my favorite topic is, human resource, how to elevate humans. And so is yours. You have like a formal degree in it. So kind of focus a little bit more on, let's talk about, how it better positions the HR professionals in forward thinking and shaping up the future of a company that they're working for.
Sure. And I agree with everything you said. And again, I see AI as a very powerful tool so that HR professionals can really focus their time, devote their attention and the value to things that really matter. And like in this day and age, talent is a very key topic and central to sort of top of mind issues that keep CEOs up at night, right? Whether it's a startup all the way to large enterprises. And the concept of, okay, like how do HR professionals think about talent, particularly the kind of talent we're going to need in the future? And if you really sort of distill down the value of what the HR team, the people team, regardless of what it's called, provides to an organization, is at the end of the day, how do you find the right talent to tackle the challenges, solve the problems, and make the organization successful? So it's really about one, understanding, okay, where are we headed? And what are we trying to accomplish? What are the big rocks we need to move? What are the problems? And like, this is the world I live in every single day, Neetu, of like, okay, what are the key priorities for my organization and my company? And then number two, what are the traits and skill sets required to go tackle these problems? And then that's when the people team comes in and partners with me and essentially says, okay, how do we go find the people who possess these skills and traits and attributes that are going to have the highest chance of success? And apply that to every organization, every manager. And that's essentially the biggest value add in my mind of how a people team and an HR organization can help propel and move companies to success. Where does AI come in to sort of help you do that? Well, again, one, automation will save you a lot of time. And if you kind of talk to and go to companies where digital transformation is slow, there are, I'm sorry to use the term, but laggards in terms of like automation, right? The use of technology and tools.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of people spending time on paperwork,
Oh yeah,
right?
we have
Processing, right? Documentation, attaching things to email, doing raw analysis. I mean, that's a lot of time suck. And again, is that activity really accruing key value to the company?
mm-hmm.
Probably not. And the individuals know that, but they have no other choice, right? Because they need to do that to move forward, get to the really important stuff. But the unfortunate reality is that takes up so much time and energy that you don't have enough time left for the really important things. And if you think about what's really important, it is that process of how do I identify the gaps and how do I find the people that are going to fill that? And again, because humans are extremely complex. And yes, we have things like resumes. Yes, we have things like work history, LinkedIn profile, so on and so forth. But it's not a math problem that an AI can solve. You can't just give a prompt to say, hey, ChatGPT, who's the most qualified person for this role? And let me give you the job description, right? It just doesn't work that way because so much of it is context heavy and relevant. And
Yeah.
so much of it is also about who you are as a manager and whether you have compatibility with that individual. So AI is not going to spit out the most qualified candidates so we can completely streamline the recruiting process and automate it, but it will allow you to do a lot of the grunt work and paper work in a very streamlined, efficient fashion. So then you really can do what only humans can do, which is let me really think deeply about what are the right people to bring in to our organization to set them up for success. And if you focus most of your time there, then by definition, your value add to the company is multiple X what it is now if you're spending most of it doing paperwork. So that's the most immediate recommendation I would make to a lot of companies and for HR professionals to think about how to leverage AI as a tool.
Yeah, I mean, wow. When you say paper and, spending so much time on menial tasks, it feels primitive, but it's real. It's actually happening.
Yes.
And as you know, that was the whole reason of Pointerz coming into this world. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you do things right for your employees is what our focus at Pointerz is. And it's not about just solving a problem for HR, it's also enhancing their talent strategy, how they manage their employees, how they understand who their core, assets are, which is humans.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
Yes.
want out of the company? Because these relationships have become so transactional. It's like you pay me a paycheck and I just do a job, and you go your way, I go my way. There's just
Mm-hmm.
no underlying relationship there. So we strive to kind of build that relationship, and that starts with employee experience.
Yes.
How do we bring that employee experience into this whole process of HR versus employee, or this game of HR versus employee? I want to understand from you that how can AI help HR basically engage with employees at a more personal level? How can AI
Mm-hmm.
contribute to that aspect of HR?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think what you're doing is fantastic because the people who need the help the most, need to, you and I both know, are the mid-sized to smaller companies to startups, right? Where you don't have the luxury of having a multi-hundred people HR organization and a massive, machine behind you and resources to help you figure this out. And you have already resources at your fingertips that you can leverage to solve these problems. And ironically, they don't have those resources, but ironically, the cost of getting it wrong is infinitely higher for a small business owner than it is for a big corporation, right? Because again, you don't have that buffer. You don't have that luxury of like, oh, we can try again, or we've got other resources we can leverage to fill that gap. Like as a small business, you and I have both kind of been in the startup scene for a while. That's just not a luxury that a lot of companies have. But if you kind of think about the dollar impact, right? Whatever that fully loaded cost is, not to sort of quantify the impact of humans in dollars, but there is a proxy to think about the amount of value you're losing or the opportunity cost of getting it wrong. And one crude measure is what's the fully loaded cost of an employee at some mid-level, right? Let's say it's 100,000, just for the lack of simplicity, or for the sake of simplicity. Let's say it's fully loaded 100,000 a year. For a small business or even a mid-sized business, like 100,000 per employee is not a small amount.
Yeah.
right? And this is fully loaded, meaning direct costs, indirect costs, and everything else. Now think about the cost of making the wrong hiring decision, or hiring the right person, but losing that person just as they're about to essentially get proficiency and start really performing and climbing out that learning curve. I've seen various estimates, very conservative, of 2x the fully loaded annual cost to 5x the fully loaded annual cost. That's $200,000 to $1 million,
Yes.
right, of cost impact. And I wonder how many people really think about that and say, you know what, I just made a $200,000 mistake. Do I really want to take the chance that, okay, like I'm going to wing it again and pray that like the odds are in my favor and I'm going to be okay? Or do you want to work with somebody like Pointerz to say, okay, how do I do this right?
Yeah.
Right? Without investing in having a huge organization and a lot of talent, blah, blah, blah. Like, how can I increase my batting average, reduce my margin of error? Because this is probably one of the most costliest mistakes I can ever make as a business owner.
And
so
this is
yeah.
Brandon, and I want to bring this out, that if this mistake is made on the front end, impacting a customer, it's the highlight of the board meeting, right?
Yes, correct.
And this same mistake, $1 million mistake or a $250,000 mistake is made in the back end with an employee, it's not even a conversation point in any meeting. No. So
excellent point.
Attrition is there. Oh my God, we're losing employees and there is a cost impact, but no one actually wants to, pay attention or actually go and do an analysis. They do it at a high level, but it never becomes the conversation point in a board meeting or in the leadership meeting that, oh my God, we made this big mistake and we lost $1 million. No.
Excellent point.
What baffles me, I'm like, how is this? Because this is absolutely something you have 100% control over. You can control this. And yet you don't do anything about it. Hopefully AI can solve it. But, going back to your point, let's continue.
Again, it would be fun. Well, maybe it won't be fun. It'll be enlightening to say, okay, I'm, CEO, founder, whatever, of company X, Y, and Z. I want to see how many people left within 6 months of hire, 12 months of hire. I want to see which people left within 3 months of hire. And then also calculate the fully loaded cost of those individuals, and then figure out, okay, what is the estimated opportunity cost of making that decision to hire that person? And then look at the triggers for why they left. And if we feel like it's involuntary, turnover or departure based on something that really was misaligned between what they expected and what the company expected, was that an important job? What did we expect the generated impact of that role? Like, are they expected to lead to $1 million of revenue first year? Like, what were we expecting as success? And then you marry all of that to say, okay, net, how much did I lose of what I thought I would get? 2, how much did I pay in absolute cost and opportunity cost from that mistake? And then you add it all up and say, is this worthy of being discussed at the board level? I guarantee you 100%, 100%, 100%. But it's never crafted or analyzed and priced impact-wise in that way. That's why it never makes it up, I think, right? It's always, oh, like we had a bad hire, good riddance, we got rid of them. It's almost like a celebration of like, and then there's no learning of like, okay, why did we pick that person in the first place? And like, what are the lessons learned? And most importantly, how are we not going to make that mistake again? I've rarely heard these conversations either, right? At companies that I've kind of worked with and consulted for. So again, it's hard, but really up to the HR professionals and the people teams to really kind of use language, metrics that are very comfortable for finance people, for C-level people to say, do you know how much these mistakes are costing us? Right? This is almost akin to buying a wrong component and having to do a recall. Okay? This is the human version of we need to do a recall. And then on top of that, what is not measurable but equally important, Neetu, you're going to love this research I came across when I was in school. So companies were looking at the impact of good employees and bad employees. And good employees and bad employees, sure, you can argue, is that a good definition or not? But very general, typical definition of works hard, good work ethic, lifts everybody else, collaborates well, communicates well, lives and embodies the values of the company, so on and so forth. And people looked at what is the lasting impact of that individual on a team and an organization above and beyond what they're contributing as an individual, right? And they measured it as, okay, like there are various ways to do a chronological longitudinal study to say, once this person joined, did the culture of the team change? And did they attribute that change to that individual? Do they actually say they benefited individually from this person because they were helpful, lifting the bar, so on and so forth? And this is the most interesting part. Let's say that person left the organization. How long did that positive lift and impact persist in that org after they left?
Yeah.
Okay. They did the flip side of, let's say we hired a toxic person or a bad hire. What kind of damage did that person do, not only in their work, but also the impact to the team? And then most importantly, let's say we caught that person, removed them from that team. How long did that toxicity stay on that team? I think you can guess what the answer was.
Yeah.
The good impact goes away pretty quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
The bad impact stays
Lingers.
3x longer than the good impact,
Totally.
even after that person is gone.
Totally.
So who's thinking about what is the cost of that lingering negativity and toxicity that now the leader and the manager need to overcome to just get back to where they were before they hired this toxic person?
Yeah.
The amount of time, effort, energy, motivation that gets sucked in because they need to do this. How do you quantify that? How do you put a value on that, right?
That's exactly the point, that something that is underlying or that is qualitative rather than quantitative somehow gets ignored or overlooked because it's not on your P&L.
Right.
So that is the sad part, because ultimately it does impact your P&L.
100%. 100%.
Right? In an invisible.
You just don't see it.
Yeah, you don't.
Because you're not looking through that lens, right?
So ultimately what I'm thinking is that if every leader, every business head can look at their organization from a bottoms up perspective and focus on the individual, I think the business is going to automatically flourish, because all of these hidden costs will go away. They will see more profitability, and they will see more, I think, sustainability as well when it comes to retention or engagement or collaboration in their organizations. It's such a beautiful, it's such a deep and complex topic to talk about. You can spend a lifetime talking about it, but pay much attention to it. But I'm glad we're having this conversation today.
Yeah. And going back to your question about how can AI help, this is sort of an interesting idea that I would be keen to hear about if somebody actually acts on this. Is, for the viewers, my recommendation would be, I'm sure most of the companies you work for has a data science team or a explicitly AI team or a machine learning team. And one area that I find personally really fascinating is, there are a lot of really good predictive algorithms now that essentially have input parameters that try to predict some specific outcome. And let's say outcome is low employee engagement, or even like turnover or quitting or quiet quitting. You put whatever you think is measurable and an important outcome for you as an HR professional, and then engage with the data science team. And obviously it's not going to be from the get-go really accurate or high fidelity, but it's important to get started, because even starting will, I think, unveil some important findings for you, such as, where does the data sit? Right? Some of these sort of the inputs that are going to help me predict who's going to be highly engaged versus not, who has a higher propensity to quit versus not. The input parameters are going to be multiple data points that probably sit in different repositories. They're formatted differently. They're probably time-lapsed differently. So at least explore, where are we? And even before you get started, there's massive data cleansing and collection effort required. Then at least that's something you can point to and say, hey, if we're truly strategic and placing importance on people, this is the first step. We need to clean this up because this is not usable, right? And let the data science team help you scope how much effort would be required, cost would be required, time would be required. And then after you do that, some interesting hypotheses you could run to say, intuitively, based on my experience and industry research, I feel like the key predictors are probably going to be like these 3 variables, right? That are probably going to be intuitively, logically tied to predicting engagement, turnover, whatever it is, satisfaction, whatever it is. And then test it out, And more often than not, you're going to be very surprised, assuming you have enough data to draw a conclusion. You'll be
Mhm.
very surprised to say, wow, that actually had almost no impact.
Yeah,
Or something that I didn't even imagine would be important or relevant is actually important.
yeah.
So go on somewhat of a fishing expedition to find what are the things that seem to show correlation, right? It may not be causality, but at least correlation with
Yeah.
that outcome. And that becomes a starting point to ask more questions, do more analysis. This is the kind of activity that I think AI will unlock, and new skill sets and ways of problem solving HR people need to think about going forward.
I think we have already kind of taken that hypothesis and proven that hypothesis at Pointerz, because we use a lot of prescriptive predictive analytics. And
Mm-hmm.
you talk about AI, we use NLP, we use deep machine learning, and that's exactly what we do. We just take all these data inputs and run analytics on it, and it'll tell you, hey, this is the attrition rate, and this is how much money you lost, and this is why people are leaving
Mm-hmm.
you. Here is where the gaps are, and here is
Mm-hmm.
how you can fix those gaps,
That's
right?
awesome.
It takes everything from the feedback people are getting or exchanging, the recognitions they're getting, the goals they're achieving or not achieving, where are the
Mm-hmm.
friction points in the organization, and how the organization has grown from a skill set standpoint, from one individual to overall organization. If you are a marketing firm, do you have the necessary skills for marketing, you know,
Right.
and serving
Right.
clients? It'll tell you that. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel I feel happy when I talk about Pointerz, but yeah, at the end of the day, I don't want to be kind of hey, it's all about Pointerz, but it is definitely a huge deal when AI comes into the picture and becomes your strategic partner, becomes the guiding
Yes.
light, and how
Right.
you actually compute or process things that will take you a long time. It's tedious, but it'll do
Mm-hmm.
it in a snap. And
Right.
analytics we're talking about. So
Yeah.
this is amazing. I mean, I just love it. Um, so before we wrap up this amazing discussion that can go on for, as I
Right.
multiple episodes, let's
Yeah.
touch on the challenges and considerations that come with integrating AI into HR. Brandon, as with any technological advancement, there are
Mhm.
ethical, privacy, and bias considerations to address. And we
Yes.
know with AI, that's like something we are still figuring out and haven't come to a
Mm-hmm.
conclusion yet. I think for a long
Yes.
time it's going to be that way. So, how can HR professionals ensure a responsible and ethical implementation of AI?
Um, I mean, I can give you my personal point of view,
Sure.
and by no means am I an expert in AI ethics or regulations, but I think again, sort of a common sense approach of number one, making sure that you know where the data is coming from, right? Because AI is only good as, or machine learning or algorithms are only as good as the data that they have to train themselves and learn. So just like a child, if you expose them to bad things, they'll learn bad things. And so there's the element of the is it good data that's being used to train, and we can measure good in a variety of ways, but at a minimum, it should not be biased, and it should really be aspirationally the kind of data that you would want as a learning tool and a training tool for an algorithm to sort of help you make better decisions going forward, not reflective of all the biases that we already know exist. And that's why, going back to the point of data, if you use existing data, I see people make this mistake a lot, which is, hey, AI is somehow going to be really objective, and hey, AI is a machine, so it's not going to have the bias that I have, right? Well, okay, in a way that is true, but in terms of like, what is it basing its own decision on? It's on data that you trained it on, and that data is from you.
Yeah.
So basically, it's going to be a mini me in that sense, right? It's going to have all the biases that you have. So one, know where the data is coming from, make sure it's good, and then two, make sure that it's compliant with all of the things that come with privacy laws and regulations, and also privacy policies. Go above and beyond what the law says you're allowed to do, and make sure you're doing the right thing. Because we see a lot of algorithms and crawlers and essentially software that's going and scraping and collecting data that sometimes they should not be collecting, scraping, at least without explicit opt-in or permissions. And again, how does an AI know? You basically just unleash it in the world and say, grab and learn from everything and anything you can find. It will do exactly that. So setting the boundaries and setting certain standards, figuring out a way to measure that. And I saw really progressive states like state of New York that says if you're going to use AI in hiring, you have to do audits at every sort of fixed interval to make sure that there isn't a high level of bias in your algorithm, right? So I think it's going to be a mix of good common sense, do the right thing from a principle standpoint, and then the regulation, I believe, is accelerating compared to the past because there are so many changes that are happening fast. The legislative bodies and the government bodies are trying to catch up, and I think they are becoming a bit more agile than they have been historically. So just look for guidance when you can, best practice when you can, but do not have blind faith. I mean, we all kind of laughed about the lawyer who used ChatGPT to sort of write a closing argument. And ChatGPT, essentially, this is what the researchers call it, hallucinated an actual precedent of a case that does not exist, right? God.
Yeah.
The question of where did you find that? Did you really dream it up as a separate topic worthy of its own discussion? But that lawyer was obviously disbarred. And that trial was, I think it was a mistrial because so think about, just people thinking ChatGPT is know-it-all, smartest thing, and I'm just going to basically use it and it's going to allow me to have all the right answers all the time that humans cannot. That is absolutely not where the state of affairs are right now. And so please do not have blind faith. Please do not use it without looking at it, QAing it, making sure it's being used in the right way. And also really pay attention to where's the data coming from, and also the implications of using it, because particularly in our realm of HR, decisions you make are impacting people and lives. So we have a higher sense of responsibility, in my view, to make sure that it is behaving and delivering things the right way. So I can't overemphasize how important it is to do that due diligence.
Yeah, I think couldn't sum it up any better. I think one, please kind of educate yourself on AI, particularly generative AI, what it can and cannot do and how it really functions.
Yes.
And little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I can say it over and over again. Please assume that AI is kind of your EA, and you can say, hey, go type letter and they will put all the emotions in it. No, that doesn't happen. It needs the human touch. And the human touch is essential to ensure that AI serves as a force of good in HR, beyond, in every field. And if we learn how to actually apply it the right way, in the right, kind of walks of life, I think it's going to make life much more easier for us and we benefit. Wow. This is like absolutely delightful.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Neetu.
Yeah, conversation about how AI is empowering HR teams. And I feel like we are just scratching the surface. There's going to be much more innovation. And it's actually a revolution that we are kind of starting. So many more episodes to come and many more conversations to have around AI and how it's basically touching all walks of our life, from,
absolutely,
like what should I cook for dinner tonight, or what should be do? Hey, can you just fight this case for me in the court? I don't know what all it can do. Amazing. But for now,
it is amazing.
It's great. And this was an amazing conversation about how we can help human resource teams use AI to be more strategic and focus on the well-being of our employees. Awesome. Well, Brandon, the pleasure of having you on the podcast was all mine. Amazing. And I think it's going to be a delight for our audience. And
thank you
for your insights and sharing these golden nuggets with us.
Thank you. It was fun. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Brandon. And for our audience, thank you for tuning in. And we'll be back with another episode of Inclusive Insights again very soon. Thanks and take care.